Wood, smoking on my dragons, divine righteous, almighty greats, overachieving, never slacking. Today, we're flying over to Scotland and we're going to find out why Scotland is 94% empty, which I had no clue of. So with that being said, original link in the description. Let's find out why.
This is Scotland, and this is where everyone lives in Scotland. Scotland's population is 5.45 million, yet 70% of them live in this area. Why? Well, let's talk about it, but before we get into it, feel free to subscribe to the channel. This area right here is what we call the Central Belt of Scotland, which holds around 3 to 3.5 million, which is 63% of Scotland's population. And if we include areas like East Fife, Perth, Dundee, that brings up to nearly 80% of the country, all within this small strip against the centre of Scotland. But why? There's plenty of other cities within the north of Scotland, such as Aberdeen, with a population of 261,000, which is the hub of all things oil rigs. It was named the oil capital of Europe, not to be confused with the Etihad Stadium. It was voted the safest city within the UK and has one of the lowest employment rates in the UK. Aberdeen was ranked as the third best place to live in the UK, and you're able to buy a castle for the same price as a one-bed flat in London. So what's not to love about Aberdeen? Well, apart from this terrifying amusement park, which I'm sure you've seen online. Well, like we said earlier, it is named the oil capital of Europe, and with such a great title comes great demand. This makes the cost of living in Aberdeen relatively high, mainly due to its high demand for housing, goods and services due to the oil industry. However, salaries in the area are also higher to compensate for this. Also, most notorious with the north of Scotland, the weather. Aberdeen is a coastal city, which makes it prone to many windy days. And when wintertime comes in Aberdeen, you might only get 6 hours of daylight. The other Scottish city in the north of Scotland is Inverness, with a population of around 50,000. Inverness dates back to the 6th century, is home of the Loch Ness Monster, and is described as the gateway of Scotland's beautiful Highlands, but yet still is only home to 50,000, which is relatively small for a city, so it can feel pretty lonely and isolated. It doesn't exactly attract the youth of society. Let's not forget, Scotland has over 790 islands, which you'd assume is a lot, but still only 93 of those islands are inhabited, the most populated of which is Harrison Lewis, which habits 21,000 people, which from pictures alone you might mistake as the Bahamas, just with more sheep.
Harris, that's my last name, y'all. Harris. I'm gonna have to check that out one day. That's on a bucket list for sure.
And a difference of 30 degrees Celsius. Other notable islands include Shetland, Orkney, and probably most notable the Isle of Skye, famous for its natural beauty and nature. Across Scotland's inhabited islands, the population is roughly 103,000. So why do more people not live here? Well, firstly, the transportation can be tricky. Some islands require a train, then a bus, then a ferry, then sometimes a flight. Sometimes the ferries are only available once a week. The world's shortest commercial flight actually exists here, a flight between Westray and Papa Westray, which lasts 90 seconds in full, which is a tourist attraction in itself. But it's hard to ignore the natural beauty of these islands. Not only is getting there hard, but so is leaving. Due to the limited housing, the cost of living can be quite expensive. The internet isn't the best, there's limited education, and for kids, there's very little to do. These are small communities that are landlocked, and these issues persist in similar communities. The Outer Hebrides in 1901 had a population of around 46,000, and by 2001, it had fallen to 26,000, a staggering 43% decrease. Researchers predict it could fall to 20,000 by 2050, which would be a shame considering its natural beauty. I reckon if Scotland planted some palm trees and added some heaters and started calling the Isle of Barra the Bahamas, maybe some American tourists could save these islands. Now back to mainland.
Kind of reminds me of like in Game of Thrones, Over the Wall, when you go to the north. You know, that's what it reminds me of. The further north, the more north you go in Scotland, it's like you're going to the north, where nobody really goes, where what they call the wildlings, where the wildlings live.
And Scotland, why is the rest of it empty? Well, we've talked about this issue before in why the Romans and Vikings weren't able to fully conquer Scotland. And one of the biggest issues is the terrain. 60% of Scotland is mountainous terrain, making it the UK's biggest wildlife habitat. The Scottish Highlands are actually the same mountain range as the Appalachian Range in America. These mountains were once connected as the Central Pangaean Mountains, the top 20 tallest mountains in the UK.
That is amazing.
So there's no easy way to say this.
That is some seriously amazing history. And that's what I really believe. You see how he's talking about Pangaea? Before in one of my videos, I said I believe humans are a lot older than they can imagine. And I believe there's a time where we were all kind of like one. And, you know, a lot of people call that, what's it called, pseudo-ism or whatever. But that's my personal belief.
The Appalachian Range in America. These mountains were once connected as the Central Pangaean Mountains. The top 20 tallest mountains in the UK are, believe it or not, all in Scotland, which makes this area extremely mountainous in comparison to England and Wales. But why do very few people live in the Scottish mountains? The combination of lack of housing, educational facilities and workplaces, functional two-way roads make it a difficult place to live. Many people who do live in these lands are self-sustaining, growing their own food and providing their own power and electricity. And also, 22% of the population is over 65 years old, who don't necessarily need work opportunities in these areas. Around 200,000 people live in the Scottish Highlands, which is about 100,000 less than how many people lived there 100 to 200 years ago. The estimated population in the 18th and 19th century was roughly 300,000, which made a lot more sense given the state of the war Scotland has faced in the last few hundred years. Scotland's terrain almost provided a blanket of safety from invasions from many fierce foes, such as the Vikings, the Romans, and most consistently, the English. Feel free to watch these two videos for more explanation on that. The Highlands were a popular home of the Scottish clans. One of the biggest reasons due to the decrease in population among the Highlands was an event in the 18th to 19th century called the Highland Clearances, the forced eviction of inhabitants of the Highlands and Western Islands of Scotland. This removal of people cleared the land primarily to allow for the introduction of sheep pastoralism. The Highland Clearances resulted in the destruction of the Scottish clans. This was after the Jacobite Rebellion, which resulted in the Battle of Culloden on April 16, 1746, during which thousands of Highlanders were killed. If you look at climate maps for Scotland, despite the difference only being a matter of a car journey, due to the terrain, a few hours' drive can sometimes mean a drastic change in temperature. So many Highlanders will be envious of somewhere only a few hours away being much hotter. The only benefit the Highlands have over the rest of mainland Scotland is their natural beauty and isolation. Many celebrities have houses in the Highlands, such as Billy Connolly, Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan, the esteemed folk singer who once sang and described that his heart's in the Highlands. The Highlands seem almost a safe haven for celebrities and retired pensioners. Scotland also do a fantastic job of preserving their natural beauty. Scotland's iconic Loch Lomond, the biggest lake by surface area in the UK, came under threat a few years ago when Flamingo Land launched a plan to build a theme park at this iconic natural site. The Scottish population were outraged and launched a petition for them to withdraw their offer, which they did, only for 2 years later for Flamingo Land to come back with a new plan. Scottish Greens have launched another petition, so if you are interested in standing up to this, I'll add the link into the description so we can save Loch Lomond together. So, despite there being room for development within property and tourist attractions, Scotland doesn't necessarily want to, which can't be said for every other country. If this was in America, I could imagine they'd have already built a theme park, a Hooters, and a giant Walmart. Scotland is one of the few countries where some places look exactly the same as they did 500 years ago, and I think that there's some beauty in that. So, Scotland is rather empty in some areas, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Thanks for watching today's video, and if you want to watch another, click here on the screen. See you guys next time.
That is beautiful. I think the most impressive thing about this video to me, though, was the Pangea, when he said the Pangea part, with the Appalachian Mountains once connecting to, you know, that area, that the Highlands, was it? That's incredible to me. just so much history. Even when you look at the Loch Ness monster, how long have creatures like that really been around? And how intelligent are creatures like that? That's it's just it's wonderful, and I love the history. I love the rich history. I definitely don't agree with having any type of a theme park out there. I think certain things should be untouched. There's already so much that has just been tampered with and destroyed. Even when you look at a lot of historical sites around the world, I use Salem, Massachusetts, for example. Sure, it's cool with all the tourism and everything, but I just feel like when people start to, make things for amusement, I feel like that takes away the magic, more and more, like slowly just takes away the magic more and more, and just the specialness in those places, especially when you give access to the whole entire world for people who don't even really appreciate it as much to just kind of come through and just, I do think it's more sacred, right? And should be treated as such. So with that being said, that was why Scotland is 94% empty. Shout out to Scotland. That's amazing. Definitely would love to visit the Loch Ness monster. That would be awesome. But with that being, it actually reminds me of I always talk about how my favorite lake in the world is Cayuga Lake in Ithaca, New York, and there's said to be a big lake monster in there too, kind of similar to the Loch Ness that's been sighted for a long time. So that's pretty interesting. But I'll tell you this much: these creatures are definitely advanced and intelligent. If they know how to avoid humans, that says a lot. That says enough. Right, but with that being said, original link in the description, and I'll be back with more soon. Much love.